Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Doing Well. And on this week's episode, we are going to talk about critical thinking in the digital age, understanding digital media literacy. It is a pretty interesting topic. I don't think I've heard about this topic before, so I'm keen to explore it with our guest today, Leah Selakovic. Leah is a psychologist with a master's degree in media psychology. She believes in using a collaborative approach with clients to aid them in developing self-efficacy, resilience, and self-empowerment through their innate strengths and abilities. Leah has 10 years worth of experience using Neuro-Linguistic Programming, NLP, in corporate settings. Thanks so much for joining us today, Leah. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for joining us. And I think it's, I think you said you're in Singapore. Is that right?
Yeah, right. It's good morning from Singapore.
Yeah, I heard it's been really hot recently. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but it's kind of cold in Melbourne. So, we would love to get some of that heat, obviously.
We need a really cold from Melbourne as well here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think we would love to hear a bit more from you because your background is certainly very interesting. You have 10 years worth of experience working in this space. And I think personally, I consider this to be such a niche space, especially when you talk about media psychology. I was kind of like, oh, that's very niche and new. I don't think I've met a lot of people that work in this space. So, what is your story? How did you get here and why did you choose this work?
Right. And actually, you're right. Academically, media psychology is quite recent, right? My story is quite different. I started with the medical school first, then I went to pursue my degree in archaeology and classical history. And then we moved back to Singapore. And then I went to psychology, bachelor in art in psychology. And I was thinking, shall I go clinical psychology? And then I saw media psychology. I was so curious about media psychology. As you mentioned, it's quite new on the field. And since I have children as well, so I was always curious about video games, the impact on the brain, and what I can do. And then I continue with my media psychology. Yeah, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting. You started in the medical space, you said, and I think that's a nice transition there to kind of like go into media psychology, because I think a lot of the knowledge you used in the medical space would definitely assist here too, I reckon. So, it'll be fun to explore what you've learned in that area. Now, before we go into our topic of the day, we have a section called Have You Met Leah? So we're going to get to know you a bit better by getting to know some of your favorite things. First of all, I would love to know what your favorite book is.
Okay, so as a book lover, right, so it's impossible for me to pick only one book that I love. So my list is long, actually, but there is a few, if you don't mind, because I cannot stick to only one. My favorite is The Idiot by Dostoevsky, from Fyodor Dostoevsky. Of course, Anna Karenina by Tolstoy, Miloš Crnjanski, Novel of London, Danilo Kish, Early Sorrows, In Search of a Lost Time by Proust, Meditation by Marcus Aurelius. I also love poetry, classical art, and so on and so on. I mean, if we have a time, I can talk about books, yes. So how about yourself? What books do you like to read? Do you prefer more paper books or are you in a digital form?
Well, I think this is the first time a guest has asked me the question. What a great question. I love physical books, but it's actually a very funny thing because I was not sure where I was going to end up in life. So I could not buy a lot of physical books because, when you move, you have to think about, oh, am I going to give up on all my books? So I started to get into Kindle a few years ago when I first started my journey here in Australia. And now I'm going back to physical copies. Now, my favorite book, that is also a very tough question because I love reading. I have so many favorites, but I'll probably talk about something that I have been reading recently, and it's called The Space Between. It's about our 20s, and it's written by two best friends who also host a podcast. I don't remember the name of the podcast anymore, but it's such an interesting read. I think I'm almost done with the first part on love. So yeah, I'm loving it so far. Really interesting read.
Yeah. I think I heard about this book. My daughter taught me about this book. She's reading. She just picked up in the library. Yeah. But I'm asking you about paper book or digital book because there is a definitely different impact in the brain, right? And when we read 30 minutes during the day, we release dopamine, serotonin, and reduce cortisol level in the body. And also we can improve focus, productivity, and creativity. So it's very important for us to read.
Yeah, definitely. I actually found it to be very different, reading on my Kindle or iPad versus reading a physical book. Yesterday, I was just in bed reading for hours and, just with the physical copies, I just really love that. And now that you talk about the chemicals, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
That's good. That's how the digital things impact the brain, right? And we know the studies show us that we cite more when we are reading paper text than when we are reading online. So we seem to be able to improve reading comprehension by citing while we are reading, which may prevent prefrontal cortex overactivity. And sight may be suppressed, and prefrontal activity may be increased by blue light from electronic devices. So that's something that people just see the differences reading paper or digital form.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the next question will have to be in the digital form because it's about movie. Now, this is definitely going to be watched with screens. So, which movie is your favorite?
I would say La Dolce Vita by Federico Fellini.
Okay, that's a new one for me. I have not heard of that before, so this is new.
But actually, it's a classic. Like, it's one of the greatest cinematic masterpieces of all time. And without doubt, for me, in my opinion, greatest ever made. And the reason why, because human conditioning, aesthetic, Rome, fashion, cast, they're still relevant today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing. This is new information for me, so I'll definitely put that on my list. So we briefly talked about podcasts earlier, and obviously you're our guest, and this is actually interesting because a lot of our guests do not listen to podcasts. I wonder if you do listen to podcasts though, and if you do, what's your favorite?
Okay, so I have a relationship with podcast on and off. First of all, I don't have that much time. But I would say there are some, when I have a spare time, I would like to listen to Huberman Lab by Dr. Andrew Huberman. The reason why, because he provides listener with a unique understanding of a particular subject, regardless of their expertise or background. So that's a good thing. Another one is a Cyberwise. It's a group of educated people, with also my professor from media psychology, Dr. Pamela, and they talk about Cyberwise, how to prevent and teach children digital literacy, how they prevent cyberbullying, and it's very, I would advise people to listen if they have the time, because they can pick up so many good advices and guidance and tips.
Yeah, well, those are good recommendations. And definitely the one with Dr. Andrew Huberman is very popular on this show as a recommendation too. So thank you for sharing. Now, next is about your role model? If you do have a role model, who would that person be?
The role model. Okay, so I would say my university professors are my role models. I have gained confidence to take risks and take things outside the box. Because of them, I have also learned the importance of hard work and dedication from them. And I'm very grateful for their mentorship and guidance.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. Thank you for that. And finally, what is a course you've completed that has really left a strong impact on you?
And definitely abnormal psychology course. I like the focus on understanding the psychology behind mental health disorders and preventing them. That's the one.
And it's called abnormal psychology.
Abnormal psychology, yes.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. What an interesting and unique name and concept. So yeah, certainly that must have been very intriguing. Thank you for sharing that. My first time hearing those words. Okay, now let's talk about our topic of the day. Today, we are here to talk about well-being and also digital media literacy. I think it's a new topic for this show, particularly, but also a new topic for myself, because I don't think I've talked to a lot of people about this topic. Before we get into the depth of it, I would love to hear from you regarding well-being, because this show is all about well-being and each person has their own unique view of it. What is your personal opinion of well-being? What does it mean to you?
Well, I would say having health, happiness, and prosperity is what well-being is all about. So it's also the ability to manage stress, have a good mental health, and have a sense of meaning or purpose among us. The factors contribute to good mental health.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good, perspective. And we talk about the fact that it's quite holistic as well. On this show, we talk about the fact that it's not just about physical health, it's about mental health, it's about spiritual health, and so much more. And I like that you add the purpose in life part to it. It's definitely something that we tend to overlook as we go about our day. And I guess that partly is because we have so much influence from the internet. We have social media, we have all the streams of news that come through on the daily, and I think subconsciously we are affected without even knowing.
Absolutely, that's where his misconception comes into the picture, right? There are a number of misconceptions about well-being. So well-being is only about physical and mental health. But the concept of well-being encompasses not only physical and mental well-being, but it's also, as you mentioned, social, emotional, financial, right? Occupational and spiritual well-being. That's one of the things. So there's a lot of stigma in regards about well-being and mental health as well. So people try to say, okay, mental and physical well-being are separate. So mental health, mental illness, right? So to be good as a well-being is to be happy all the time. So this is just a salon misconception apropos what you're mentioning just now.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I was just about to go into that, and you summarized it perfectly. I do believe those are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about well-being as well. And speaking of well-being and the digital world and all the different streams of influence, we're here to talk about digital media literacy. So for our audience who is very new to this topic, who never heard this terminology before, what is it exactly?
Okay. So digital literacy means be able to engage effectively with media and technology, to be able to have a critical autonomy in those interactions. So that's why critical thinking, self-awareness, self-regulation, and social competence are more the skills in digital literacy and education. So that's why it's crucial we have a critical thinking, right? So in digital media, we are able to critically, effectively, and responsibly use, understand, and engage with digital media. So I would say this is very important to people understand in regards to media literacy.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's quite straightforward. However, it's also kind of hard to navigate because I think we all interact with the digital space nowadays, especially after the global pandemic. Everyone has so much better knowledge about the digital space. But I don't think we have that, conscious understanding and a decision of how we engage in the digital space as much because now it's so readily available. We just go online and we have all these different platforms that we engage ourselves in. Um, and when we talk about critical thinking, which is one aspect of today's conversation, it's kind of challenging to navigate, in my opinion, because you have so many streams of information and you have so many people you can interact to, and you're kind of available at all times. So why is critical thinking important in this context, and how does it relate to media literacy?
Oh, this is actually a very good question. I have a question. I like this question. Okay. So with digital media, we have access to, as you mentioned, unprecedented amount of information from a variety of sources. Being able to access the quality of the information, the credibility of the sources, and understanding the implication of the messages is essential to make informed decision and engage in meaningful dialogue, right? So media literacy means understanding how media works, including how content is produced, distributed, and consumed. And by developing critical thinking skills, individual or person are able to evaluate the content, right? So in a sense, how accurate, is there any biases? What is my purpose? And I do agree what you said. You don't have time. The feeling very fast. The moment you open, you just go. You need the time. Critical thinking is developed. It's a life skills, right? So same things. We learn these critical thinkings from the young age. We need to be more engaged to introduce and teach children critical thinking. Right. So if we look in the world of a social media, anyone can have a valid platform, no matter what their actual qualifications are. So to avoid being misled, critical thinking is essential. It can give numerous examples. Recently, there is a post in Psychology Today article about YouTube parenting style. And that's also one of my professors, Dr. Pamela, wrote this article. I think people need to read this one so they understand better. And another thing, good looks, frequent content, and many followers can create illusion of expertise in social media. So that's why critical thinking is very important. And we critically analyze, is this relevant? It's not only sharing. People do impulsively sharing the content, but they need to go back and see the sources. And where is this, coming from?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think you mentioned this term, YouTube parenting style.
Yes.
And yeah, immediately when I heard that, I think of my nieces and nephews who have been raised with iPads, and immediately as they start to cry, or if they're not really behaving and the parents need to focus on something, they will just play something on YouTube or even Netflix. It's like the new way of parenting, and it kind of scared me a little bit, because then I think about the critical thinking side of thing for my nieces and nephews. On the one hand, we need to develop critical thinking for ourselves, and then on the other hand, we're not nurturing that in children, because if they're constantly bombarded with information on the internet, and sometimes we don't even supervise that, I don't know where this is going to lead them.
Yeah, but you pointed two things, just sharing this one. That's one we need to teach also parents some stuff, right? It's not because this is distraction, the influence on the brain, the dopamine. But from the other side, I was thinking by saying parenting, YouTube parenting, the people who don't have a credibility and then have a background that sharing advice is how you can raise a child. So time we need to be cautious. That's what I said, like influencers. Those are the people, like recently you have a popular psychology everywhere who give advice what to do when you have anxiety, then I have a depression, you do this. It can be a little bit dangerous because, those are the fields you need to have expertise, backup, and your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I think that's a very good point. And that's true. We actually search for information on YouTube a lot nowadays, right? Instead of going to a professional, we would probably Google how to make my children stop crying. I actually do that when I first started having cats. I mean, not children, like human children, but I started to Google and, search on YouTube how do I make my cats eat and come out of their hiding? And, it's just very interesting because I do get some good information, but some information is kind of like it's not that helpful. And I always find that it's better to seek help from professionals, obviously. But I think, from experience, it's also another source of information that we can sort of get as perspectives rather than strict advice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, the use of digital technology and specifically digital media, right, is becoming increasingly ingrained in our society, almost to the point of becoming necessity. That's insane. So with digital media dominating so many aspects of our lives, it is crucial to be able to interpret and understand the barrage of the digital media we are exposed to every day, more than ever. So especially for the younger generation growing up, as you mentioned, even you gave an example, in digital saturated environment.
I think, that's a good point. But the filtering and the understanding different aspects of, media and the digital world is something that we all have to learn to navigate. And again, we go right back to critical thinking, right? Which is a key skill that you were saying everyone needs to learn, everyone needs to nurture it. And I remember that in the definition of when you mentioned about well-being, you were saying, your sense of purpose and meaning, that's also very important to your well-being. What I have found, especially, having all this kind of different streams of influence from the digital world, is that sometimes your opinions of those very things that are really personal could be affected by, the opinions of people you barely know. Some people might say that, oh, you should do this, you need to do that. And so it kind of impacts your overall well-being because you might be not in alignment so much. So I'm guessing that, critical thinking here definitely plays a really important role in our well-being when we are in this digital age. So yeah, I would love to hear more from your perspective in this regard.
Yes, absolutely. That's why you have your values, right? So your values is very important. But look, digital literacy builds a skill set. It's not only one, it's a skill set that increase well-being by making children smarter, emotionally stronger, and more competent and confident. Those are not just media skills that's important for the life skill, which basically apply everything what you do. That's what I said at the beginning. You build internal strength, such as the competence, resilience, self-reliance, which can protect individuals from low self-esteem, depression, poor body images, unhealthy attitudes towards cyberbullying, right? Substance abuse, violence, and all kinds of psychological issues. So that's why it's important in that context. So our ability to think critically allows us to analyze and evaluate the information, draw conclusions, and make decisions based on our values. So unlike humans, machines, for example, follow algorithm, artificial intelligence, and then machine cannot think for themselves. So therefore, critical thinking prevents us from being manipulated. So you see, even though the digital world has many positive benefits, there are also many risks. The one you mentioned as well, there can be cyberbullying, that people are saying you mean messages and concerns. So that's the thing we need to address. But teaching the children digital literacy since the young age we build self-awareness, autonomy, critical thinking, and competence. How do we do that? That's the some tips, how we go step by step. But the more we need to work with the agencies, we need to work more to introduce digital literacy. Like the same thing you teach them the alphabet and teach them a math. We also think, in my opinion, we need to teach them digital literacy. The reason why, because it can help them to make conscious choices and prioritize their behavior using social media. We can reinforce empathy, develop kindness as well, and recognize what is healthy use of technology, what is not, what is the balance, what is reactive, right? All of these things can help.
Yeah, definitely. And when you were talking about that, I started to also think about the critical thinking that applies to analyzing how we are, sort of living on this digital space. It's not just about the contents that we consume, but also how we see ourselves, when we interact with others. Because you said cyberbullying can be one thing that, clearly impact us. But another facet of being online and engaging in the digital space is sometimes you have this whole different identity on the internet that you kind of rely so much on that you forget about your actual, like, in real life identity. And I think a lot of people now are super familiar with this, but it's still important to point out to young people, especially young kids, that the number of engagement and likes and whatever they have on the digital space does not equate to their quality of life in real life. Does not equate to how much they're growing as a person, or like how meaningful their relationships are, or how their well-being is overall. And I feel like this is still a very big misconception that like, if I get lots of engagement online, I'm great. Not really. You could be getting the best type of engagement and having a really miserable life. And I think that is where critical thinking really plays in. It doesn't matter if you get engagement from your friends if you cannot really hold a conversation with them, or you don't check in on them.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But look, as I said before, we need to also teach parents. Parents play a crucial role.
Yeah.
And children, that's what I said, that's psychology coming to the picture. Children modeling your behavior.
Definitely.
So, and also we need to teach them. There's some tips, screen times, how much time, what is screen times, how much time? Why don't you put your phone in airplane mode, so you don't use your phone on digital stuff in the house, so you can doing something else more creative. So the parents play a crucial role in this.
Yeah, definitely lead by example, right? Because I think that will help.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. So we briefly touched on the contents on the internet before, and now I think you kind of mentioned that we're inundated with an unprecedented amount of streams of information, contents, however people want to call it, and it's getting really hard to filter sometimes. And sometimes I know that especially spaces like even news websites would slip in contents that you didn't really look for, but then it's just kind of there. So what kind of content should we be looking out for when we are sort of browsing or engaging in the digital space, or in other words, when should we apply this critical thinking to really assess what we are reading and what we are consuming?
I would say all content online should be addressed critically, in my opinion. And I tell you why, because there is when you come to the term in online content, the most common challenges are assuming everything online is the truth. So that's a common mistake. It may result in inaccurate information, biases, deception, affecting your actions and decisions as well. So what is important to check the sources, check the date, check the evidence, the purpose, compare the information with other information by developing critical thinking. That's important. Another thing, you also mentioned these things, relying on the search engines and social media for information. In addition to information literacy and digital skills, using search engines and social media platform is also common pitfalls for people. And these tools are useful and very convenient. We all know that, right? But they are neither neutral or comprehensive. And they are popular and it's easy to get access. So the best way to avoid this trap is to look for the information for various different sources, right? Use specialized database on the websites, and also the most important, evaluate the credibility and author who provides these resources. Many times I can see through the social media how people plagiarize and violate copyrights. That's also important to mention this year, right? Because copyrights allows creators and authors to control distribution and use their work. Copyright violation or plagiarism can result in, we all know, particularly if you're studying, in academic penalties, legal actions, and reputation damages. But using appropriate citation, styles, and tools is crucial to avoiding this pitfall because it's respecting intellectual property. Another thing I would say when we talk about challenges, it's privacy and security issues. Using and sharing information online can also raise privacy and security concerns. You have a right to control how your personal information is used, collected, and disclosed. So by using strong passwords, encrypted antivirus software, so you're protecting which apps to use. So do a little bit of research, right? Another thing we have about like older generations, they're not updating or improving the skills. By saying this, I mean, it's very important by improving your skills in digital world because it's require constant learning and practice to keep up with new technology, new trend, challenges, what's going on, because technology is so rapidly moving forward and develop, right? Another thing, if you don't apply your skills to real life situations, so that's what happened. Then people become passive, isolate, or uninformed.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are some really great points that we can keep in mind when we start to engage in any kind of interaction online, whether it be consuming content or even receiving information, because you were saying, security and privacy, that's important. And I have still been hearing stories about how people get scammed. And, it's kind of a thing where you think people would have this knowledge by now and they wouldn't get scammed because of a random text message or for such a strange request to be coming through via a text message that looks suspicious. And it's actually like I think another skill too, the critical thinking, right? Apply to situations where you find things to be a little off, and sometimes it's just good to be vigilant because that's might not be the actual person speaking. It might be an imposter, or it could be a bot scamming you. And this has happened to me so many times. I remember this time when I was out collecting a parcel. Before that time, I received a text saying that I needed to fill out my information to redirect a parcel, and it looked pretty legit. The text message, even the URL looks legit as well. But when I clicked on it, it looked weird. And so immediately I just exited out of there. When I went to the post office and I asked the people there, they were saying, oh, we would never text you to redirect. Everything would happen on our app. Or, if you are opting for communication via email, then you should receive an email from an official, account from us. And then I was like, okay, well, good thing I didn't fill that out, but I did click on it. So it's kind of like there's a lot of challenges out there to navigate because sometimes these things can be sort of like camouflaged as real official sources, and you really have to be vigilant, coupled with critical thinking, and think about how you would normally interact in these spaces. I think that would be very helpful.
Yes. And also in Singapore as well, there are always prevention is crucial. So we always have this one, do not click on the link. And also sometimes it's a common sense, right? So if someone from Ministry of Education send an email or something, we just need to critically evaluate why should they click on this, why they were sending me this, and how they use this information. So that's why sometimes it's not only, that's why it's important that we have those softwares to prevent us from this kind of viruses, but it's also artificial intelligence as well when they pick up things. So we need to be very cautious, and that's why it's important for critical thinking. When the children are small, what usually I do a safety patrol, right? So I raise the red flag, the green flag, the yellow flag. So the red flag is when the danger. So we conditioning the children where is the danger. So the yellow flag in between, the green you can go. It's a safety. So the same thing we can conditioning by applying this digital literacy in the schools and education. And particularly with the children between young age, let's say, that's why it's important in psychology 0 to 9. If you are familiar with psychology, Eric Erikson and Piaget, they talk about social, emotional, and developmental period. So that's very important and crucial for children, right? But when we talk with the kids, young adults who are teenagers and already 18 and 19 years old, they pick up these things, they know.
Yeah, definitely. I think these are now life skills, it's just not just skills for digital media literacy, but they're now life skills because we're, never going to get away from technology at this rate. It can help us. The digital space can really help us if we know how to navigate it wisely. And speaking of which, I think we've covered grounds on lots of the theoretical part of the conversation. And I think it's time to get a bit more practical with our audience so we can suggest some practices or habits that our audience can adopt to help them with their critical thinking in this digital space. So I would love to get you to share a practice or maybe even practices that you personally adopt or you would recommend to our audience to actually cultivate the skill of critical thinking in today's fast-paced world?
Yes, I think I already touched a little bit because it's, as I said, keep saying the same things, but I think it's very relevant and important for today's topic, right? A lot of information, data, opinions are available online, but not all of them are accurate and helpful. So in order to cite your sources correctly, you must use your critical thinking to verify, compare, and contrast them. Do not post fake news, plagiarize, or violate third-party rights. So you need to be cautious when you cite somebody, let's say poetry or anything. You go back and check the sources. Maybe that's out of the context to God. Where is the picture? Do you have a right to post this picture? We can see a lot of examples on the social media, also on Facebook, on Instagram. People just share, but they don't cite the sources, right? That's why critical thinking fosters this intellectual independence and creativity and ability to adapt to a new situation.
Yeah, definitely.
Encouraging the people to embrace this critical thinking. I will repeat again, this is a lifelong skills and it can have positive impact on the individual and society. So very important. So questionable sources, you can also be more aware of potential manipulation and false information online. This is very helpful for them to critically evaluate the information and sources on the internet. So to answer your questions, check the sources. Number one, the habit, right? The first step to access the online information is to check the sources of the content. Who is the author? Who is the publisher? Organization behind the information? What are their credential, qualification, and affiliations? Are they experts, professional, reputable institution or field? That's what I give you an example of parenting on YouTube. If people give advice for the parenting, for the children, for the parents, but then they're not an expert, right? Check the date. The second step is very important because is this update, is revised, is it current, historical, does it reflect the latest research, development, trend topics? The third thing is also important, check the evidence. Accessing the online information and check the evidence that support your content. That's what I give you an example about social media, Facebook and Instagram, right? What kind of that data, facts, statistics, examples, references are used to back up their claims, arguments, or opinion? And they are accurate? Is it valid? Is it, is it original sources? And their site? And they are linked to any kind of a property? So very important. Check the purpose. Another thing, very important as well, because why was the information created and publishing and shared? What is the main message, goal, or intention of the sources? You can usually find this information in a title, introduction, conclusion on the web page. So I want these young people to understand and remember this. Another thing is check the quality. So is it clear? Is it coherent? Is it logical? Is it consistent? Is it grammatically correct? Error-free? Well-edited? That also can be one of the things that we can keep in mind. And the last thing I would say, the habitual, is to check your own bias. How do you approach, interpret, and use the information? Do you have any preconceived assumptions, preferences that might affect your judgment or evaluation of the source? I would say this is the habitual to answer your questions, what we need to do.
Yeah, thank you. Those are some really important steps that you've recommended. And I think, depending on the situation and the circumstance, we can, choose and use some or all of those steps even. I think the part where you're checking the source of the information is actually quite important. We actually get so much information nowadays, and someone can speak with conviction, and we can kind of like, oh, that person sounds so convincing. Sounds like they're an expert, but then turns out they're not. So, it's also good to check, the background of the people providing the information as well. Just like you're saying, the source of the information, because in the academic space is the citation. But in reality, even if we're not in the academic space, we might bring that information to our friend group, or, to our family without citing where it actually is coming from, or we can just say, oh yeah, it comes from a credible source, and turns out it's actually not, and so we're spreading false knowledge perhaps. And I think that's actually a really important bit of that practice that I personally need to remember myself, because sometimes I fall into the trap of looking at something, I'm like, oh wow, that's interesting, but then turns out it's not accurate.
Yes, I remember when I was my bachelor degree English language and literature, my professor, we talk about, she was very about citation, is how important. She gave us some advice, and she said when she finished, and in the end she said, I will never forget these things. She said, you have to cite your own grandma. It doesn't matter, it's your own grandma, you need to put the citation there. So it's so implemented in my subconscious mind. And even when I talk to my own children, when they're 6th grade, for example, a couple of years ago, when my son did the research, and I said, okay, where did you get all of these sources? And he said, oh, I found here. I said, why don't you put in the paper? So the teacher knows where did you get the resources and how you go the research about. And this is, I start slowly. That's what we said. We're teaching them from the young age. So later on, you don't need to remind them. They already do it. They become habit for them.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. Well, thank you for sharing all of the information, the knowledge, and especially the practices today. I think they are super helpful, especially for anyone who is kind of new to this or who have been just going with the flow when they engage in the digital space, which I guess is, most of us. We don't really have that sort of conscious decision always in the back of our mind when we're engaging in different kinds of interaction, and especially with contents. Like I think that it's so dangerous, especially with the TikTok scrolling and, Instagram reels and YouTube shorts. You can just keep going. There will be no end to it. And you just keep consuming content without knowing where they come from and how helpful they are to you. So having that critical thinking is really, really important. I think another thing that would probably be helpful, and I picked this up from actually a YouTube short. This is very funny. So the guy that was creating the video was making recipes, because I like to watch, short videos on recipes that I can make at home. And he actually pointed out, he was interacting with the audience by asking, why are you here? Do you know why you ended up here in the first place? Do you remember why you're here watching this video right now? And I found that to be so interesting, because the content was about a recipe. I think it was an omelet recipe. Looks really amazing, but the stuff that he was talking to the audience about was even better, because that is actually critical thinking too. Sometimes you need to catch yourself by asking yourself, okay, why am I here? Why am I reading this or watching this? How long have I been here? Is this actually helpful? And, is it time to opt out? I think that is also another thing that we can definitely try.
Yes, yes. And that's what I said at the beginning, the values, right? What is your value? Sometimes the kids going because of procrastinating. They have exams, they go distract themselves on the social media. And that's what the TikTok offers them very fast. They just changing the fast. But those are Generation Z, right? Sometimes we need to keep in mind that protective factors for healthy media engagement, what you're sharing, literacy is often overlooked as a solution. That's why it's very important. And despite the all, I give you an example. You mentioned the chef, right? So influencers without relevant experience don't understand influence or how to manage the fame. And there's a recent event in New York about young influencer, and he invites the kids to come, and he was giving some surprise or PS5 or something like that. And then like a storm of the young adults show up. So what I want to say, the influencers are more appealing to Generation Z more than the traditional celebrities. So in that sense, by feeling like a friend, parasocial attachments increase persuasive power of an influencer. So that's also important to teach the children critically about what they consume and to be aware of persuasive power of influences. So that can help them to understand and resist digital peer pressure and make a better decision what they watch. I watch YouTube, or I watch, National Geographic, I watch about archaeology, or I watch like a TikTok.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I love National Geographic, by the way. I just love that channel. Any content they produce, I love. But yeah, I digress. So thank you again for being here today and share your insights with us. Before we let you go, we have this section where we call open mic. I know you are passionate about so many different areas, especially digital media literacy. And I think at the beginning you mentioned media psychology as well. So the floor is all yours. I wonder what you would like to talk about today.
Okay, I really use this space to talk a little bit about media psychology, right? This is important for me, but it's also my passion. I cannot limiting myself. My passion is just like from archaeology, classical history, many, many things. But now I will stick to one, otherwise I'll be lost with all of this beautiful topics I can share. Okay, so first things, many people doesn't know, not familiar what is media psychology, right? So we'll try to a little bit define what we do in regards to technology. So the answer is not easy, it's not straightforward, and it's not simple, right? We know psychology is the study of human behavior and emotions and cognitions. But media includes all form or mediated communications, right? So basically, media psychology uses the lens of psychology to understand the human interaction with technology, right? So psychology in that sense plays a crucial role to understand the impact on society. So by saying this, I mean, let's understand of human behavior, cognition, and emotions with equal understanding of media technology. So before we understand psychology, we need to understand technology as well, right? So it can be encompass anything from virtual environment like gaming, marketing communications, developing in social media, education materials, anything there, right? But because of technology, because the technology is a constant changing, critical thinking and cognitive flexibility is necessary. So how we can use the psychological theories to provide the framework to understand how media can influence individuals and society. One of the things in media, for example, in media psychology, cognitive psychology is particularly important. That's when we talk about critical thinking, right? How we process information, make mental models, attention, perception, problem solving, making judgment, and also intelligence, right? So in that category, that I can put theorists include Piaget, Chomsky, Broadbent, Wundt. Those are some of them, right? And how media psychology use these psychological theories to apply in the technology, in regards to technology, as a developmental appropriate in the sense of content, information, comprehension, and media presentation. It's based on education, media, and learning style, right? So another theory I would touch a little bit is social learning theories. Then we have learning in a social context. And I mentioned to you about social cognitive theory. There's a root in social psychology. And I mentioned how we are parents and modeling during our talk. Then one of the most, let's say, famous is Bandura and Brunner. They talk about the constant knowledge, all knowledge to do with organizing and categorizing information using coding system. Right. Then another one we have Allport and Festinger. One of the things also is important how we create through the social media narrative story and storytelling. But the narrative psychology examine the value of stories and storytelling. Why the things, for example, I know we touched this as well, including in Instagram short stories. Why they're so popular? Why the TikTok and people are talk fastest things is storytelling. They give meaning to individuals' life, right? That's a qualitative humanistic approach to cognitive processing. How we see the things, how we identify through developing and sharing narrative. Of course, positive psychology also plays a crucial part in regards how we focus focuses on empirical studies on positive emotions. We all know strength-based, healthy relationship with social media. Seligman, Dana, and of course, we have a relevant to development of pro-social media, including public service, how we use gaming, usabilities, learning technology. So you see, all of these theories provide a framework to understand how media influence individuals and society in different ways. I didn't mention psychoanalytic theories, which is focused on understanding conscious and unconscious processes, which is developed by Sigmund Freud. And the major theories here, I would say Adler, Erickson, Jung, Fromm. I think it's also Sullivan as well. And basis understanding personality and elements of media affect parasocial relationships. And one of the things is also it's important, that's humanistic psychology. Then we have a holistic view that focuses on the human context and motivation, attitudes, and needs. You probably heard about Maslow, hierarchy of needs, Fromm, Rogers, and how people actually, what does it mean that? That's how people select media experiences that satisfy cognitive, social, and emotional needs. Of course, not to say also about developmental psychology. That's a maturation across the lifespan, where development progressing through stages, relational skills, life tasks. So I think this is important for people to understand how we can use all of these theories, psychological theories, and provide a framework to understand how media influence people and society in a different way by applicable these psychological theories.
Yeah, really cool topic. Thank you for sharing that. I think that there's certainly lots of food for thought there for our audience. And speaking of which, if they would like to get to know more about this topic and know more about your work, where should they go?
At the moment, I have a lot of engagement in training. They can look for me at the sakak.sg, and also there's my profile there. They're able to reach me out. Also LinkedIn. I'm not so active, but try to be. It depends on if I have time. And also I work on my book. I'm hopeful the book will go next year out. In regards, I try to combine philosophy and psychology as well. They can see on www.sakak.sg.
Oh, very cool. Thank you, Leah. And you said the book should come out soon. So do we know the title of the book yet?
No, I have a title, but I'm not ready to share because I'm not sure this will be the title or other title, but I work on this. This is one half of the book is done. So I need this practical application in regards to psychology. And I also love philosophy. So I like to integrate all of this. Beautiful things.
Yeah, well, very cool. We're going to be excited to, welcome your book and find out which title you're going to eventually choose. So, work in progress. And thank you for coming on to the show and sharing everything today. I think it's been a very interesting discussion, lots of food for thoughts. And certainly it's not a new topic, but it is a niche topic that we certainly need to talk more about. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm grateful if you're able to touch and make some clarity for young adults how to use and implement all what you talk today. That's huge success.
Yeah, definitely.
So much for inviting me.
You have been listening to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights podcast produced by the Wellbeing Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website, we.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.